Hi class, today I want to talk about something that's pretty complicated. It's actually called the meaning of the word meaning. Those quotation marks means that I'm talking about that word, the meaning of the word meaning. It's one of the more complicated things, particularly with regard to artificial intelligence and ethics in general. One of the first things that we worry about is the distinction between what are called literal statements and figurative statements. So let me just put those down. Literal versus figurative. And these are both statements. The reason why the idea of statements is important is that statements are usually are things that we use words to describe, and we can determine whether a statement is true or false depending upon whether or not it reflects the actual state of affairs in the world. Literal statements are going to be more like scientific, or things that are more like history, perhaps. Figurative statements are things that are more poetic. They may reflect the state of affairs in the world, but they're not going to reflect them literally. So poetry or mythology, stories, these are things that are generally figurative. And human speech uses both types of language. Sometimes we say things literally, will you come and help me move the couch? Or we say something figuratively, like I'm feeling a kind of blue feeling today. So there's the distinction between literal language and figurative language. And that's just the very beginning. Literal, true statements, and this is an interesting distinction. We often hear the nonsense that there's no such thing as truth. That's just pure hogwash. True statements are literal. And what they mean, not all literal statements are true, but all true statements are literal. A true statement is a statement that can be demonstrated true, or is a statement that can be shown to be true because it reflects the state of affairs in the world. So, for example, if I say, my head is green, that is not a true statement. I don't care how you feel about that. That statement is either true or it's false. So these words, true and false, refer only to statements. They don't refer to the world. I can't say that the world is true. That doesn't make any sense. I can't say my head is true. That doesn't make any sense. But the statement, my head is green, is an objective statement that happens to be false. So we have literal statements and figurative statements. Literal statements are statements that can be true or false, and they actually reflect the state of affairs in the world. Figurative statements are statements that are about subjective feelings. They're incredibly important, and one of the most important ways that we have with communicating with each other. So now let's look at some other ideas about how words themselves gain their meaning. Words can have what's called an objective connotation. And the objective connotation of a word, I spelled it wrong, of course. The objective connotation of the word is its literal meaning. So if I say, what is the objective connotation of the word blue? And I'd say, well, lo and behold, is the color of my sweater. The objective connotation of that is this particular hue, this particular color. The other thing that words have, besides an objective connotation, that words also have a subjective connotation. I'll try to write straight. The subjective connotation is not its literal meaning. The subjective connotation is, again, this figurative meaning. So the subjective connotation of the word blue would mean I'm feeling blue, but the feeling of blue is not the literal meaning of my shirt. It's a statement about a feeling. So that would be the subjective connotation. Objective connotation would be the hue. Subjective connotation would be feelings depressed. But words also, and that's what we're talking about, the meaning of words. But words do more than that. So they not just have objective connotations, they don't just have subjective connotations, they're awfully often used simply to denote things. And that's called denotation. Denotation. The denotation of a word is a particular kind of literal use. It's when you use a word to refer to a particular thing. So if I say, this blue shirt, I'm using the word blue shirt to denote this. Or if I say, that mirror over there, take that mirror and move it over here. I'm using the word mirror to denote that particular mirror on the desk that's being used for my lighting. Or if I say, Joe sitting there, I just use the name of Joe to denote that particular person. So when I say get that brick and put it on this wall, I'm using words to denote. That word stands for that particular thing. So now we have these three kinds of meaning. Objective connotation of words, their literal meaning. The subjective connotation of words, their subjective feeling states and subjective meanings. And the denotation meaning of a word, it means a word stands for some particular thing. Now, that said, we now need to move into a problem of language itself. And language creates a set of different problems. One of the problems with language is that you can't make any statement unless we share a language. So I can't say a word to you that you don't understand unless you understand that language. The only way you're going to know the meaning of any word is if you and I share that language. Sometimes those languages can even be intimate. They're languages between you and your friends. But those languages, even the most socially intimate languages, are based on public language. As it turns out, human thinking occurs in language, and we get that language from our community. So we are always speaking the language of other people, even when we're thinking in our own heads, even when we're talking to our most intimate things with our friends and lovers. Still, that language, there's nothing you've ever said to anyone that you haven't used public words to do it, which take place in a public language. It's an interesting thing to remember. Your thoughts can be translated into the public thoughts because your thoughts are composed of the language of public thinking. That is what language is. So now if you and I share this language, I can say things, my speech can be unique, but I'm going to have to use that language that we all share. So here's the big question. Language is the system. Speech is the act, how I use that system. So now my question is this. Is there anything that all words have in common? For example, let's take the word chair. Is there anything that all chairs have in common? Now, typically everyone says, well, it's something you sit on. So then I could say to you, well, if that's true that all chairs are something I can sit on, then if I sit on the floor, is the floor a chair? You'd say, no, the floor's not a chair. You're using the floor like a chair. And I said, well, then okay, then what is that all chairs have in common? I'm not talking about how I can use things as a chair. They said, well, it has a back. And I said, well, here's a stool. It doesn't have a back. And they said, well, no, okay, it's a kind of... So every time I try to come up with something that all chairs have in common, it turns out there's nothing that all chairs have in common, except we all know what the word chair means in a language. So there's no way you can know what the word chair means unless you understand language that I share. More cool than that even is that the more you know about your language, the better understanding you have of that word. In the past, people like St. Augustine and others said that no, language is simply a word stands for a thing. There's a philosopher by the name of Thomas Hobbes. He said metaphors are dangerous speech because it's all confusing. You can say one thing using another thing and nobody knows what you're talking about. Well, he's wrong. But the reason he's wrong is because his idea of what makes a word meaningful is he said the word dog means one of those things. I have a dog on the floor there. That's not what the word dog means. As it turns out, the word dog only makes sense in a language. So individual words have no real meaning. Now, they might be used to denote that dog or that thing, but generally speaking, a word's meaning does not stand for a thing. The word chair does not mean one of those things. The word chair is a way in which my language organizes thought. So there's two theories of language. One is called the reference theory of meaning, and the other is called the coherence theory. The reference theory of meaning is the idea that this word refers to that thing. That's what Thomas Hobbes thought. That is false. That is not generally accepted to be true. The coherence theory is the idea that this word only makes sense in a language, and the meaning of that word becomes more explicit as we know more and more and more words. So let me draw a picture to see if I can't show you this. I'm going to have to erase this a bit. Of course, everything's set up, but I lose my eraser. Here's the question. Let's say I have a chair. This is a chair. In order to know what the word chair means, I need to know what the word sit means. But in order to know what the word sit means, I need to know what the word rear end means. We'll put butt just for safety. And to know what that means, I need to know what body means. And this goes back to the chair. And this goes to body, a human body. And to know what the body means, I also have to know what arms and legs are. Arms, my arms as opposed to my legs. And every time I get a new word, I get a better understanding of this word chair. So the meaning of a chair isn't simply, I have to know sit, I have to know stand. Of course, I can't know what sit means unless I know stand. And I have to know what the word tired means, because you only sit in a chair when you're tired. And notice as I know more and more words, each of these words is interconnected into a network. And each of these are like nodes where all the words can connect it together. The more words I know, the better understanding I have of this word. And that's why when you take like the SATs, they have your verbal comprehension. If you can't say something, you can't know it. No words, no world. No words, no way to grasp reality. Now, reality is out there somewhere, and true statements are statements that reflect reality. But if I don't have words, I can't possibly get outside of myself to know what I'm looking at. So language is that unique human ability to create a system that we use to speak about the world, and in speaking about the world, we come to know the world. Now for the trickiest part of all. There's a philosopher who came up with a distinction between discursive and non-discursive language, and she uses this. Her name is Susan K. Langer. Susan K. Langer. And she uses this distinction between, I'm going to erase again. Oh, wife to the rescue. And she uses this distinction between discursive and non-discursive language to describe art. A discursive statement is a statement that we think of as a literal statement. So here's a discursive statement. Well, pretty much everything I've been doing all day today is discursive. I'm explaining something to you. I'm hoping you understand it. I repeat what I'm saying. Hopefully you understand that. I repeat it yet again, a little more clarification. That's standard discursive language. I'm trying to zero in on the meaning using lots of words so you understand the literal meaning of what I'm describing. Non-discursive is not literal. So discursive would be literal. Non-discursive is figurative. And it's extremely important. When you look at a photograph of a license, let's say your license photograph, that would be a discursive. That's an exact replica of you, so the police know whether or not to give you who they're giving the ticket to. But a caricature of you is non-discursive. In other words, it's intentionally inaccurate. And its inaccuracies give you certain aspects of you that are better. So it's a kind of falseness that helps you understand things more clearly. A story is non-discursive. History would be discursive. Well, we pretend it is. Philosophy, for the most part, pretends at least to be discursive. Sometimes it's non-discursive. So let's look at it in a way that you really understand. When I ask my wife, honey, am I looking too old these days? I'm really old and worn out. Now, I know very well what I look like. I can look in the mirror. When I ask her that question, is that discursive? Well, hopefully not, because if she gives me the literal answer, that's not what I want. I would only ask that if I'm trying to test to see if she knows I'm feeling a little old, I'm feeling a little worn out. So her answer, hopefully, would be, oh no, honey, you look great. So in other words, that whole conversation was non-discursive. I asked a question that I knew the literal answer to, hoping to get an answer that was not a literal answer either. So really what was going on there is, you still like me? Yeah, I still like you too. Yay, everything is going great. How about this one? You go shopping with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and you say to your partner, or whatever the new world here of partners is, you say, honey, do these jeans make me look fat? Do I look fat in these jeans? Well, what's the right answer? Well, it all depends who you are. Now, if that's your girlfriend or your boyfriend who asks you that question, you better not say yes, because that's not what that question meant. That was a non-discursive question. That was a question saying, do you think I'm appealing to you? And you'd better come up with the right answer, or we're not going to be together a lot longer. That's non-discursive. If you go shopping with your mom and you ask her, do I look fat in these jeans? That's a discursive question. She's going to say, absolutely, yes, honey, you put on some pounds. I don't think those pants work for you. Or if you go with your new friend and you're all going to be like chums and buddies and, oh, how do I look? Oh, you look so cute. Oh, no, you look so cute. Oh, that's non-discursive again. Now, you might think this is just a silly example, but if you're in healthcare, you have a patient who's got tubes and wires coming out of them. They say, do I look okay? My kids are coming to see me. Do I look like I'm going to die? Well, you know they're terminal. Do you think that's what they're asking? This is not the time to be giving them the medical prognosis. You're going to say, you look great. Your kids can't wait to see you. You have no idea how important seeing you is going to be for them. That's non-discursive. So one of the difficulties of human life is understanding whether we're using language discursively, which is literal, or non-discursively, which does a whole series of other things. So that essentially ends our discussion of the meaning of the word meaning. And what I hope you get from this is that the meaning of a word is extremely complicated. Essentially, they denote, get that thing. There's a subjective connotation, I'm feeling blue. There's the objective connotation, blue is a color in the color spectrum. And then there's these ways in which we use language. Discursively, to become literal and articulate in the most specific ways, and non-discursive, which is really the domain of poetry. For those of you in the computer class, in the artificial intelligence class, do you think that computers, artificial intelligence will ever be able to speak non-discursively? Will they ever be able to say the opposite of what they're saying? I hate you, meaning I love you. Anyway, thank you very much.